Hi everybody, thanks for joining us today for our Modern Intranet Trends and Best Practices webinar. My name is Ben Skelton, I'm the Vice President of Habanero.
And my name's Caterina Sanders, and I'm a Senior Consultant here at Habanero.
So we're live on Twitter and we want to hear from you. So please, we are at Habanero Consult and the hashtag we're using today is Modern Intranet. So please tweet away. So I thought I'd start with just a really brief introduction of Habanero for those of you that don't know who we are. At Habanero, we're incredibly passionate about helping organizations become better places to work. We think there's so much untapped potential in today's society that can be unlocked by helping people build exceptional careers and ultimately help organizations perform at higher levels. This is what inspires us to come to work each and every day. Habanero has been ranked one of Canada's top workplaces on the Globe and Mail Best Workplaces in Canada list for 7 years, and we placed #1 in the country twice. We've got a relentless focus on creating high-performing, engaging teams, both inside our organization and yours. And we get immense pride by being on this list, but ultimately we're prouder to see our clients there. We spend a lot of time helping organizations understand how they can become better places to work and supporting them on this exciting journey. When you think of what we do, it's really kind of 3 different areas. The first is we help organizations with culture and transformation. The second, and really why we're here today, is intranets in the digital workplace. And finally, collaboration and content solutions. And I think what these all have in common is really we're helping humanize the workplace. We've got offices in Vancouver, Calgary, and Toronto, and we're very proud to touch down in Winnipeg last year. Over the last 17 years, we've built over 200 intranets, and we're really proud to be recognized as building some of the best intranets in the world. We've got 4 Nielsen Norman Awards and 4 Intranet Innovation Awards for our work. We also create the Go Intranet Accelerator, and many of the examples you're going to see today were created using Go. So today we're going to talk about 3 things. We're going to talk about the new world of work, and ultimately how the world of work is changing. We're going to share best practices from the world's best intranets, and then we're going to talk about emerging trends that we're seeing from an intranet perspective.
Okay, so let's jump into the new world of work. So I think this is actually a line that people have been seeing for a while now, that the world of work is changing. We're actually of the mind that it has changed. The next few slides that I'm going to share with you are some things that I think probably all of you have experienced personally. And it's kind of individually you say, okay, it's when you put them all together though, then you really start to get a feel for the context of where our workplaces are at right in this moment in time. So one of the first things I want to talk about is how we have moved into a post-industrial world. So back in the day, way more people were working in manufacturing. They were building things for a living or providing services to other people. Whereas today we have this new area, it's called the knowledge area. What's interesting about it is that even those roles that were in manufacturing have taken on this knowledge era flavor. So if we stay with the car example, you know, it's not just you're on the assembly line and you're putting a car together. The expectation is that everyone who works on that line has the ability to stop the line because something isn't meeting standards, something isn't working as it should. And that's actually a real switch if you think about it. So workplaces are expecting people to act with autonomy and to be able to make decisions inside of broader contexts. And that's not trivial. And how do you create a workplace that can actually fuel that?
Ultimately, everybody is a knowledge worker now.
Well, exactly, yes. Related to that, in fact, then, is this idea that we're moving away from hierarchies. So back when it was more about a concentration of power at the top and that knowledge meant power, quite little trickled down to the rest of the organization, and that was actually by design. Whereas now what we're seeing is organizations that are actually trying to break down silos. They're trying to encourage as much cross-pollination of ideas as possible. So you're seeing the emergence of some areas called hierarchies, which is a bit more of that lattice or matrix model organization. There's still definitely companies out there that are classic hierarchies, but even they, with very strict reporting lines and solid lines and dotting lines and all that good stuff, but even they are working really hard to make sure that if somebody over in one corner of the organization has a good idea, that it can find its way to decision makers and that it isn't sort of being held up along the way, because that's the path to success for organizations, is they need to be able to be agile. So with that comes the fact that there's all of this information that is around us. Workplaces have been focused for many years now about giving employees more and more data in whatever format it might be, the intranet being one of those main channels. What we're now hearing, though, from employees is not, I wish I had more information, but rather, I have too much information. What I need is the right thing in the right moment that I can apply in the way that I want to apply it. So it's not just about creating intranets that are dumping grounds. It's about being really thoughtful and deliberate so that people can get what they need when they need it. Personal and work lives are absolutely getting mushed together in a way that hasn't been seen before. So even the fact that there's backlash now against work-life balance, it's not about one or the other, it's about work-life integration. And so what the modern workplace is trying so hard to do is to fuel that blurring together, because in fact, it's what people want. People want to be able to do work when it fits in with all the other things that are going on in their lives. And workplaces want to allow that, partly because it absolutely allows for greater engagement, but also because it does mean, in the end, greater productivity, because people can fit stuff in when it makes sense. Well, the aging and retiring workforce. Yes, this has been sort of hanging over our heads for a long time. It's here now. The boomers are retiring, although granted, you know, lots of them are staying in the workplace longer than ever before. Some of them because financially they have no choice. Some because they still are vital and relevant and have lots to contribute, and they want to continue to do that. And by and large, employers are happy to allow them to do that. What many of them are doing, if not exiting with retirement, they are at least dropping their hours. And there's a whole surge of professionals coming in behind them, and they need to be able to learn and understand and be as productive as many of those retirees are. And so, again, the modern workplace is trying to figure out, how do we get information from those people who are leaving and put it in the hands of those that are coming in? And there's been a shift from, let's just take everything that's in their heads and dump it on the intranet with a bunch of documents and policies and procedures. There's been a shift from that because it kind of didn't really work. People didn't want to consume information in that way. And it is still very much about connecting people to people. And what you'll see when we get into our best practices is many intranets are really taking that to heart and trying to figure out how can they connect their people to people. Bit of a cliche, but it's true, so here we are. Constant, the only constant is change. The pace of change is increasing all around us, but in our workplaces more than anywhere. And in fact, you can see so many organizations talking about how, so if they're not startups, they want to be like startups. They want that agility, they want that nimbleness. If they are startups, they want to be they want to have repeatable processes, but they don't want to lose any of that agility as well. And so what you're seeing is a pressure to create tools, to create a digital workplace that can flex and change with whatever requirements come that way, and how to do that in a way that isn't completely discombobulating to the people that are trying to work inside of it. So yes, so these forces, they have pushed the workplace into some new territory. And I think it's partly because we are now so completely awash in all things digital. The place that everybody goes to is, they say, okay, we're going to deal with all of these forces by undergoing a serious digital transformation. We're going to take all of our legacy systems and move them forward. The things that we don't have currently in digital format or a way to interact with digitally, we're going to go there. So that's all great. And I would say that, in fact, this was probably what we were hearing even 5 or 10 years ago, it was all about the technology. But really what's emerging is a lot of data and evidence to support that when you go technology first, you tend to lose out on the elements of the humans that are messing everything up. So it's a strategy challenge, it's a systems challenge, and the way that we kind of view it here at Habanero is that the digital workplace is about a people-first orientation. but of course, this critical, pervasive technology layer. I think we see this in our personal lives, and we're seeing it in the workplace. And I would like to say, for the purpose of today, that we can consider our intranets as almost a microcosm of that digital workplace, and that intranets need to be viewed from a people-first point of view in order to really truly be effective. And I think that the best practices will really underscore this point as well. Something very interesting that's happening as well is that there's a consortium emerging, and that would be this collection of effort coming from IT, HR, and communications. And what we found when we've done this presentation in front of live groups of people, well, as opposed to dead groups of people.
They were all alive, I promise you. They were very engaged.
They were. But what we found when we asked the audience was that it was pretty much a third, and a third of people coming from an IT perspective, a people and culture perspective, or a communications perspective. And I think that one thing I take away from that is it's really interesting to see folks attending an intranet presentation from HR or communications. That would have been unheard of just a few years ago. But also, there's this recognition that each one of those groups have really important perspectives to bring to this whole intranet universe. Namely, you've got IT, who, of course, deep chops in all things technology and the tools. Then you've got your HR, people and culture folks who are probably the ones who are most tapped into what's happening within the employee experience. And what is it that employees are needing and wanting and where they're coming from. And then you've got communications who, of course, I mean, they're the experts in content and sharing ideas and getting key messages out. And so when you put those three together, that's where the magic happens with an intranet. So why don't we now look at some of the best practices and look at lots and lots of screenshots.
Thanks, Kat. That was awesome. So we're going to cover 9 best practices of modern intranets, and let's just jump in. So the first one, you know, it may seem kind of simple, but it's actually probably the hardest one, and that's starting with great, timely content. As Kat said, we had a live audience in Toronto, Vancouver, and Calgary, and we presented this quote to the audience and said, how many of you would say this is true of your intranet? And I think in most, or I think in all the audiences, there was maybe 2 or 3 hands, if that. And they weren't bold hands. No, they were only halfway up. And I think that's really telling, is the fact that, you know, ultimately you should think of your intranet as that single source of truth. It should be the place where you get the information and you know it's up to date. And it's pretty sad that that's not the case. The first example I wanted to show you today is Goldcorp. Goldcorp is a mining company. They're based here in Vancouver, and they've got mining operations in North and South America. And this is the Goldcorp intranet. One thing I want to note too is that all the examples you're going to see today, you're going to see mocked up images and mocked up text, and this is ultimately to protect client privacy. So Goldcorp came to us and they were really interesting. They came to us with this challenge and they said, you know, we want to do something different. We want you to break the rules. We want you to create a really exceptional intranet. And they gave us I wouldn't say free rein, but they gave us a lot of rope to try some new things. And so I think the team did a really exceptional job in the creation of Conveyor. So ultimately you can see here, Conveyor, if you look at the top, it's got 6 hubs. A news hub, a My Goldcorp hub, a safety hub, sustainability, departments and teams, and policies and procedures. So the interesting thing about this intranet is it doesn't have a homepage. You actually land on the news hub, which is very, very different. Another interesting kind of area of this intranet, or part of this project, was originally Goldcorp had 13 portals and they were integrating all these portals into one experience. So you could imagine as a communicator what a challenge that would be. So this is the news hub. And you can see at the very top, we've got 3, these are our corporate news stories. So we've got the safety corporate news story, an ethics corporate news story, and a sustainability one. Below that, we've got our stocks and quotes. And below that, we've got Goldcorp at a glance. And this is really your KPIs. This is all the information you need to know that's happening around the organization. So this could be safety statistics, this could be production, or really anything else that Goldcorp feels is important for their employees. If I go further down the page, you can see here, this is all my local news. So in this case, I'm actually at the corporate office. So I'm seeing all the news that's specifically for me at the corporate office. I think one thing that's interesting about the Goldcorp example is they were able to commit to having a picture for every news item. And I think often when we think of intranet content, we think of words and text, but really we should be thinking deeper. It's imagery, it's video, it's all of these different elements. Below that, you can see we've got more recent news. And if I scroll down, we've got video as well, so I can see the latest videos that are happening. Now, I think Goldcorp is a really great example. The News Hub is fantastic. But I think a lot of intranets, people focus on the homepage. I don't actually think that's an area that a lot of organizations have trouble. I think where intranets really fail to perform is when you dive deeper, when you need that specific piece of information and you can't really trust it. Right now, we're on the Sustainability Hub, and I think this is what Goldcorp does a really great job of. As you can see here, sustainability isn't a couple of pages. It's not a pithy statement about sustainability.
It's not a link to a PDF.
It's not a link to a PDF, exactly. It's a really robust, deep section with really great content. And I think this is what makes Goldcorp's Intranet an award winner, is the fact that it has great content throughout and they put the time and effort into it. When we were doing our sessions, we got a lot of questions on, people said, how do you do this? How do you actually, it's all great to say create great content, but how do you actually make this happen? And I think the first is to create a really awesome information architecture. And the key with a great information architecture is co-create it. Everybody has to understand why the information architecture works the way it is. Why are we structuring the intranet like this? Because it's very important when your content authors are adding information, they know where that information should go. As well, a really robust content strategy is important. You need to understand who you're creating for, what kind of content people are looking for, or those audiences are looking for, how often you should create content, and everything around the content strategy is really important. It's also important to have an intranet manager, and in large intranet projects we often see, especially during the design and development phases, sometimes there's a content wrangler who's really a project manager for content. An area that we see that's missed so much is content author training and best practices. I think far too often we see people train content authors on the technology,
yes,
but they don't actually train them on how to write really great, compelling web content. And I think that's an area, that's a real miss.
Yep.
And then finally, collect and use content feedback. There's many ways you can collect feedback on content in your live intranet. So it's really important to collect that feedback and use it. So number 2, create a great mobile experience. So when Kat and I were doing the session, we asked people how many organizations had a mobile optimized intranet or a responsive intranet. And it really did surprise us how few people put up their hands, especially with our experience around IT departments and really figuring out mobile device security, mobile device strategy. We're seeing more and more IT departments become very comfortable in this area.
They've come a long way in the last few years.
Yeah, and so it really did kind of catch us off guard.
Yeah.
And what we've done, definitely for, I would say, the last 3 years or so, is every intranet that we create is responsive, even if the organization isn't ready for it yet. Because organizations are moving really quickly, and so we really do believe it's a best practice to have a responsive intranet. This example I'm showing you here is the Junction. This was an intranet we created for the Royal College of Dental Surgeons in Ontario. They regulate dentists in the province. And what you can see is the homepage of their intranet when you use a desktop PC. They hadn't figured out their mobile device strategy yet, but what we said is it doesn't matter. We're going to build a responsive intranet for you anyway. So you can see here, this is what the intranet looks like from a responsive perspective. We've got the weather, we've got our TTC updates, we've got areas like what's new. Below that, we've got what's happening, so you can see all of the various events on the intranet. We've also got Kudos Corner, and Kat will talk about this in another example later, but ultimately this allows you to post a kudo for anybody else in the organization. Below that, we've got a People Spotlight, And then finally, we've got a photo gallery where people can submit photos on their mobile devices using an email address, and they get posted to the intranet. So I think this was a really great example, and it was really bold of the college to say, you know what, it's really important. We want it responsive, even though we're not ready for it, because we want to be ready for the future when we are.
Yeah, and so it's actually kind of an interesting segue into people and culture being at the heart of your intranet, because in fact a mobile device then means that people can interact with your intranet in downtime. So that means that sometimes those human interest stories are the ones that's what they want to look at when they're on the bus, and that can drive a much stronger employee experience, and it has value for that reason. So this is a paraphrase from an interview that I did with an employee for a recent project. And basically what she said was, when I first started, I didn't get a sense of our culture from our intranet at all, but I did from our Facebook page. And that struck us as kind of a real missed opportunity. There is no reason for your intranet to not reflect who you are in a really bold way. And so here's an example that we did for Wawanesa, large insurance firm across Canada. So in this case, the design that we created for them really features a lot of imagery, and a lot of that imagery needs to be, our recommendation should be of people. And so you can see here that the colors used, all of it does speak to a certain corporate presence, that people can look at this and feel like this is Wawanesa. In this panel here, this is what Ben was talking about. So here they've got a whole panel dedicated to recognition. So this is their homepage, right? This is hotly contested real estate, and they've chosen to use part of it for recognition, which is fantastic. And in this case, a few things to point out. One, that every time there's a recognition given, the individual who's receiving it and the person giving it, you can see that their avatar is there. So we're making a connection between people and faces. Then we're also, we've got social features enabled here. So folks can interact with these recognition comments with their own comments or with likes. And so that also then deepens the connection. So then this photo gallery here is really quite neat, because what Wawanesa, it doesn't show in this mock-up, but what they ended up doing with this photo gallery is they turned it into a replacement for an interbranch newsletter. And people loved receiving the newsletter, but they didn't love having the extra volume in their inbox. So this allowed people to upload images from the branch, happenings, events, what have you, with a little description. So they were still getting that cross-branch sharing, but they were doing it in a way that actually everybody now could participate in, even if you weren't in the branches. And it's a lot more visual, and it's super easy.
This is an area that we see time and time again. We tend to put photo galleries at the bottom of the page because ultimately people are so drawn to it. And I think, every so often we get comments on, the pages are quite long. Will people see this information? And it's kind of one of our tricks of the trade, put some of this people-focused content at the bottom, because what we find is people will scroll down. My big joke is, if you've got a cafeteria menu, put it in the footer. Everybody will see your KPIs and everything else you want them to know.
Yes, you'll notice the corporate metrics are just above that. Yep, absolutely.
Exactly.
So this example here is from the Alberta Treasury branch, and this around, connecting people to people. So here you can see somebody did a search for the Intranet committee, and these are the results. So just to talk about the search for a second, you can see that it can be split between everything and specifically people, so that's kind of a nice touch. Also, the search can be, you can use a whole bunch of different facets to filter what you're getting. And so if somebody is kind of trying for one of those shot in the dark things, they can use this to find a person who might be able to help them. What we like about this example here is, at first glance, you get to see pictures of people, you get to see their title, you see their phone number. If you then hover over, you get a whole bunch more information. If you look at the bottom of that hover state box, you'll see a link for view profile and a link for follow. So the follow piece we're all very familiar with from our Facebook social media worlds, and so that's another way of connecting people to people. And then if you hit view profile, you get this, which is now a whole bunch of information that should allow you to not only know if this is a person that you should be reaching out to answer your question, but hopefully it will make it more comfortable to do that. And in many organizations, there's also connection here to, you can see presence, you can connect with them with Skype. So there's a whole bunch of different ways in which you can make this very easy and seamless. The next example in this people and culture piece is from Quadrille. Quadrille is it's in real estate property management, and it kind of came out of a hiving off from a bunch of other organizations. So they had a very unique challenge, which was they were going to have a whole bunch of people coming together as a company kind of in short order. And because it was a brand new company, the leadership team was really excited and very much wanted to promote a culture of openness and transparency. So you can see that a little bit just even in the visual design that they went with, very open, clean, again, lots of imagery, and definitely that they wanted to be able to highlight people. So you can see they have certain areas around meet the transition team, get to know your colleagues. Here also they use some of their real estate to include polls. This was where they wanted to be able to connect with employees often and easily to get their opinion on how things were going and what they were seeing, what they were doing. And then they had this panel called Introduce Yourself. And this was quite unique to Quadrille. But basically the idea was you join the organization and you post a virtual introduction. And just to make sure that people would take the time to do this, before the intranet was launched, there was a little bit of time spent with the leadership team to get them to model the behavior. So they all put in their introduction so that it would be populated when people came to the intranet in those early days. And what we're finding now, a few months post-launch, is that this whole section of Introduce Yourself, so this panel, and then if people click more, people are doing that. It's one of the more heavily trafficked areas, and people are finding it's been really great as a way of connecting with one another. And you can see that we also turned the social features on here so people can like and they can comment, and that's just yet another sort of way to make people interconnect. Related to Quadrille still, and their In Touch was the name of their intranet, you can see here their Employee Essentials homepage for this section. And around people and culture, what I wanted to point out here was this area called Transition Center, where they spent a lot of time thinking about the employee experience of transitioning into a brand new organization. What are the questions that people might have? How do we make that transition as seamless as possible? And also, they had a pretty lean HR team to start with, and they wanted to make sure that people were getting the information that they needed without having to constantly be pinging HR for those answers. And so they did a really nice job on this page. And again, just putting forward this, we're here to help kind of a vibe that was so important to the culture they were trying to create. So our next best practice.
Leverage the power of social. One of the interesting questions we got in, I think, a couple of our sessions was, a lot of the examples you show have likes and commenting, but what if our executive team isn't really ready for that? Or what happens if you have these destructive employees who post bad things? And it was a really interesting discussion because our response was, what we typically find in organizations where we spend a lot of time discussing this issue is that the thing that happens when they launch their intranet is actually it's tumbleweeds. Nobody posts anything. And it's ultimately because you don't have a culture that's accepting of it. And I think that's one of the most important things for social to work. You have to model that behavior from your leadership team on down. I think in my history here at Habanero, which has been over 17 years, I've only seen 2 examples where a client has had to basically remove a post because of bad behavior. So it's a really rare occurrence, and that's why you'll see so many of the intranet examples we have likes and they have comments.
Yeah, and I think it's related to this as well, is that none of this stuff is anonymous. So it's not like the Globe and Mail comments. Mm-hmm. It's people's names are associated with it, and we've always seen that people have treated it responsibly.
Perfect. So I just wanted to touch on Goldcorp again. This is their safety hub, and this was an area for us. Safety is incredibly important at Goldcorp. Having a culture of safety, ensuring that everybody understands that safety is the #1 priority. That's something that the organization is relentlessly focused on. And what I found interesting is the Goldcorp has turned on liking and commenting. And they've got articles, for example, they've got this article on the Day of Remembrance. And the type of conversation and the level of the conversation that happens in these articles is just absolutely amazing. Mm-hmm. And when we want to change culture, culture change happens often through dialogue. It happens through discussion. It happens when you understand somebody's point of view and you have a really great conversation about it. And so from our perspective, Goldcorp actually has one of the most successful social implementations on their intranet. So during our sessions, we got a lot of questions around enterprise social networks, and specifically in our case, Yammer. Yammer's a really interesting one for us. I think there are a ton of benefits from using an enterprise social network, and I wanted to cover a few of those today. The first, I think, is networks like Yammer are a really great place for both work conversation and personal stories. And I think what's so powerful about the personal stories in Yammer is it takes it out of email. And I think this is one of the most fundamental things about a great digital workplace is you have the right tool do the right thing. Mm-hmm. And ultimately, email is not the best place for a birth announcement, an anniversary, a birthday. Email is the place ultimately where we kind of want our most urgent, time-sensitive messaging to happen. Whereas Yammer is an awesome place for those conversations that might not be as time sensitive. This is a great example from our own Yammer network here at Habanero. You can see that Curtis had a son. What I think is amazing is that he posted this at 1:04 a.m., which is kind of hilarious. But I also think that shows the mobile device. I'm gonna yam this, if you will, and you can see all of the congratulations and the likes, and it's just a really awesome spot for these personal stories, and it really does take them out of email. I believe since we launched Yammer at Habanero, my personal email dropped by about 50%. Sure. It might have been even a little bit more than that.
Well, if you consider all of those congratulation replies would have been emails.
Because everybody loves to reply.
Exactly. So you'd come in, if he posted this, if he sent this as an email at 1 o'clock in the morning, then you would have come in to that at 7 a.m. I look at it as that whole push-pull, right?
Totally.
So email is you can push information out, whereas with a social network, it's more pull people in.
Yeah, for sure. I think often we have executives that are worried about an enterprise social network. This is going to be a place where we trade cat pictures and we've got all of the stuff that's not work appropriate. But I actually think, especially at Habanero, what we've seen is that the enterprise social network, yes, there's personal stories, yes, there's things like that, but the primary use of the enterprise social network is actually work. And I just wanted to share this example because this is one of many. We could have pulled thousands of these, but we thought this was a nice one, where James in our Calgary office, he wanted to get the latest future thinking views on the role of IT in the enterprise to help serve his client. And so this is his post from Yammer. You can see here James posted his question to the company newsfeed at 8:44 a.m. He tagged people from around the company he would have otherwise emailed. And then you can see here all of the resources he shared can be seen by anyone. And a handful of people gave him suggestions by lunchtime. I think the most powerful thing around an enterprise social network and around Yammer is this example. If this was an email thread, Barb was accidentally left off the email thread. Mm-hmm. She wouldn't have been able to see this conversation. But this was in Yammer, and so Barb was actually looking at the Yammer at the point or at the time, and she said, I've got an answer to this question, or I can contribute to this discussion. And I think this is super powerful because email really is that place where conversations go to die, and Yammer is the place where conversations can thrive. Also, what's amazing is this conversation can be searched. Somebody new joins the organization, they can see these previous conversations and participate. And as you can see here, by early afternoon, James had 5 replies. And this was likely more than if he had emailed everyone. So I think it's a really good use case. I do want to give a warning about Yammer, though, or really any enterprise social network. What we found at Habanero is we're super progressive. We love technology. Everybody likes trying out stuff. But we found an interesting fact, which is a approximately 2/3 of our company absolutely love Yammer. They adore it. I think if you took it away, they'd quit. They'd be like, I'm out of here. Because we use it in our day-to-day lives so much. But there's about 1/3 of the company that absolutely hates it. They say, you know, I've got too much to read already. It's noisy. I don't want to participate in all these conversations. And so I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. Again, this goes to the digital workplace and using the right tool in the right way. But what this tells us is that your intranet is still very important, even if you have a thriving enterprise social network. And the intranet is that place for that single source of truth, for all of that information that you need to know what the answer is. For essential company information that everybody has to view and has to know, the intranet is the place for that. Meanwhile, Yammer is the place for those conversations to happen. And so I think it provides a nice bit of context of how we should separate these things.
Yeah.
Perfect. So number 5, be iterative and agile. I thought I'd share a really fun project that we worked on to kind of explore this best practice. WestJet came to us with a bit of a challenge. They said, you know, we've got an intranet, but it's not necessarily doing the job we want to communicate to WestJetters worldwide. And so they brought us in for a week and they had us do this co-discovery work with them. So we came in and we actually figured out how can we improve communication in the organization with WestJetters, and that can be everything from a flight attendant to a pilot to somebody working in an airport. And so we had some ideas and we came up with some prototypes. And what I really love that the team did here is, you know, in this kind of
spirit of agility.
Exactly, spirit of agility. They created this paper prototype for a responsive website. And this was really cool because ultimately we created this. They went down to the Starbucks in WestJet headquarters and they grabbed people and said, can we test this with you? And they moved the paper up and down as people scrolled. And as they learned things, they cut paper out and pasted it on. But it allowed us to really rapidly prototype something that would work. And what was really neat is WestJet then said, you know, this is a great idea. Let's build this. And so this rapid prototyping, along with tools like our Go Intranet Accelerator, allowed us to create something really exceptional in a matter of months. This is the hub, as you can see here. This is that one place people can go for news and updates and really all of that essential information that WestJetters need to know. I love the idea, or I love the fact that WestJetters are all owners. And so you can see here, you've got the WestJet stock price. But probably my favorite part is the joke of the week. You can see here, jokes are such an important part of WestJet culture. And ultimately, this was something that we built into the hub for them. I think this is just a great example of, you know, that old concept of we're going to build an intranet and it's going to take us a year. This is a really neat example of using tools like Office 365 in the cloud and Go. Doing agile prototyping and really iterative design allows you to create solutions to these problems really quickly.
So, best practice number 6, which is target content when possible. This quote here is a paraphrase from somebody we interviewed, where she kind of flat out said, I really think that the intranet and the people who run it are dumb. What she was expressing was her frustration that there was so much content on there that wasn't relevant to her. And so, to summarize, it's not everyone has the same information needs, so don't treat them the same. This is the power of segmentation. So segmentation being where you have a really deep understanding of who your audience is, and that, you know, people in certain roles, certain geographies, they're going to want different information. And so as an example, here is Enbridge's intranet. This is their homepage. But what I want to show you is behind the scenes here. This is a template from their people section. They're about to do a little post based on they do a president's corner, so the president can share information with employees. So the piece I want to highlight is here, where you can see a bunch of meta information that the authors can use in order to make sure that this content hits people according to these different sort of filters. So when we say don't forget about the authoring experience, I guess the one caveat is Segmentation, very powerful, but don't go too crazy with it. If you have too much metadata that the authors have to fill in, it makes authoring really laborious and probably you're not getting the right value trade-off. But if you hit the right amount of facets, then it becomes great. Then people are seeing information they want to see, and your authors can manage that easily. The next best practice is around findability and search. So here, this is the intranet for First West Credit Union. They're a fairly recent amalgamation of 3 different credit unions. And what I want to highlight here under the heading of findability is if you look at their main navigation, there's really just 4 areas: serving our members, running our business, employee essentials, and collaboration sites. Very slim, nicely labeled so that it's very intuitive of what you'll find in those areas.
I love that you could be brand new to this organization and totally figure it out. It's not about department. It's not about, does finance do this or does operations do this? It's dead simple, and I think they really nailed it.
Exactly. Yes, for so long, intranets were being organized according to department, and like every usability test has proven, that's not how employees think or work. So that's fabulous. That's great findability. This little piece here is kind of a neat twist on search. So what they've done with their help and support contacts is we created a separate search index where they were able to think of kind of hot topics that people routinely looked for help on, and they could populate specific contact information to help with those problems. And so you can imagine in this case, like if you look at the far one that says ATM technical support. So here you are, your branch manager, your ATM has gone crazy on you. Super quickly, you can jump in, get the information that you need, and start to get that problem solved. So very powerful and really pretty straightforward to implement. Also under the heading of findability and search is, this is from Black & McDonald's intranet, The Wire. In this case, you can see a lot of effort being put into the search experience. So on this page, a few things I'd want to highlight. One is you can see the green box highlighted everything, and beside that you've got people, and beside that you've got project and team. So right off the bat, you can do a search and you can decide from 3 big buckets what you're looking for. If you look at the far left, you'll see there's a whole bunch of filtering that you can apply as well, so you can try and narrow things down. You can also then on the right, you've got some information on trying to find a SharePoint legacy site, and I think maybe one of the neater pieces is what we kind of call our findometer, if you will. So did you find what you're looking for? And people can give you feedback and say, yes or no, but also the why. And this little chunk of feedback here is very powerful to go back to and be able to refine your search results. Because then the last 2 things I want to point out is you can see a box called definition for FED and what that means. And then below that, recommended. That takes effort on the part of an intranet manager to go in and add, it's kind of like creating best bets. But if you're collecting feedback, if you're seeing what people are searching for, you can now really make it so that it's almost like a Google experience, if not as good as.
I think this is such a powerful example because so much effort and time is put into your global navigation and structuring it, and what we see is half your users just use search anyway. So really you should be investing as much time and effort in your search engine as you do in creating that beautiful, amazing, easy to use navigation.
Absolutely. I like that it's an or, because don't put all your eggs in the search basket either, because for a while there was a movement that intranet homepages would just be a search page.
Oh no, don't do that.
That did not go well. That did definitely not go well. Another example then here is just very quickly for Service Credit Union, if you look at the far right, using meta information, they've been able to have it so that you're looking at a piece of content, but on the right you can see all related additional pieces of content, be it related products, procedures, policies, etc. So rather than having the standard boilerplate, maybe a little did you know or a
or that
contact.
same repetitive piece
Yes.
of content that you have in every right-hand bar.
Exactly. Yeah. Use that real estate to make something to create that findability and to create that almost browsing experience where you're looking at a piece of content and you're seeing things you didn't even know that were relevant appear. So that's really powerful too.
Number 8.
Number 8, so measure, analyze, and report. So oftentimes what we find with intranets is people are getting really good on the measurement side. They are embedding the tags required, they're hooked up to Google Analytics, they have a sense of who's clicking on what, and generating great dashboards like this, which is fantastic. But without additional context, this information will fall flat. So this is a dashboard. You can see that it's showing page views. You can even see the trend lines. But how are you meant to understand what's causing those blips? What's causing the ups? What's causing the downs? So in this example, what I want people to take away is fantastic, you've got dashboards, but please don't just leave it as, I created a dashboard, you can look at it, and now you understand how our intranet is functioning. You need to pair it to a narrative. One thing around views that we wanted to highlight here with Goldcorp is, along with the social features we've talked about, the likes and the comments, what you'll notice is a little eyeball in that same area of icons. So this is very subtle, but what it does is it gives both the intranet manager and the intranet team an understanding of what content is getting viewed, but also it gives that same information to the people who are on the intranet that there are some areas that look to be hot that they should be checking out because look at how many views there are. So that's kind of a neat, does double duty.
I think it's pretty progressive and really shows them as a transparent organization when you're exposing data like that used to be hidden in Google and actually showing people how many people are viewing pages and looking at it. I think it's pretty cool.
Yeah, because there's a sensitivity to what if I have a page with no views? But
delete it.
Yeah, well, change it, exactly. Use that information. So this next example is from our own intranet. And here at the footer, if you look under the share a photo button, you'll see a link that says view page analytics. And here we've decided to do a little experiment. We've taken what Goldcorp is doing, which is making views available to everyone, and we've just sort of pumped it up a little so that now people can see much deeper analytics on a per page basis. Our hypothesis is that this is of interest to everybody, but we're going to let it run for a bit and we'll see what kind of feedback we can.
We'll measure it, Kat.
We'll measure it and then we will analyze and then we will report. And so don't forget about your qualitative data. And so this same area here, if you look to the bottom right, you'll see a little feedback button. And what we are doing is asking for people to give us feedback in the moment about the page, you know, what was there a problem and what have you. And this will then go into what I was saying before, which is you have a dashboard, you want to create a narrative. Tools like this are a way of creating that narrative. And so just to close, if there's one thing I can leave you with, it's to please implement a measurement framework, because this will be one of your most powerful ways of tying the detailed measurements that you're collecting back to the corporate strategic direction that your intranet is meant to be supporting. And this is a step that many organizations skip, which means then they end up with measurement, but they don't have a why they care or what to do next.
So number 9, our final best practice is that great design matters. And hopefully you saw this peppered throughout all of our best practices, but I just wanted to tell one brief story. So this is an example from Provincial Health Services Authority, and this is their intranet pod. And what I think was neat was PHSA understood that they had the development capability to build their intranet. They used our Go Developer Edition and they were able to do that all themselves. What I thought was really neat is they said, you know, we want to invest extra time and extra money in the design to make sure that we're designing a really exceptional experience for their employees. And this to me was a really, really inspiring project because they did spend that time and that effort and that money to create a really great experience. And so I think this is a really good example of that. So now we're going to cover 4 emerging trends, and I think the first is the trend around the digital workplace. And I really believe tools like Office 365 have really brought this conversation to life. I'm going to scare you right now and show you this chart. It's kind of funny. This is the periodic table of Office 365. It shows all the various tools that are available. I never think of a periodic table as being a good or a fun thing.
No.
Generally, they're complicated. And I think what this shows, though, is the number of tools that are available and the number of tools that are coming every day. And I think this is such an interesting part of the digital workplace discussion around what tool do I use? When do I use that tool? And when you think of the traditional intranet going back a number of years ago, it was really about creating a portal that embedded every piece of content in it. And it was kind of that one-stop shop. And when we think of the new digital workplace tools, they're really centered more on what we would consider an app model, where you go to various apps to do that function and you kind of jump between those apps pretty seamlessly. And I think with the new set of digital workplace tools, you really see that come to life. This is Office 365 here. You can see I've clicked a waffle icon in the top left, and I can see all of my various Office apps there. And I think from our perspective, this is an emerging trend, but there's really a best practice in this, which is building connections between these apps, so users don't really have a very kind of fragmented experience. And I just want to share one example from this. So this is the WestJet example we showed you earlier, but this is actually the desktop view. So somebody's sitting at WestJet's headquarters. If they went to the hub, they would see this experience. Obviously, they have the same functionality on mobile as well. But what I think is really interesting about this is WestJet said to us, Yammer is our social tool. That's where we want all of our conversations to happen. From when we look at our digital workplace, we've got Office 365, and we've got Yammer, and we've got SharePoint Online, and we want each tool to do the right job. But we didn't want to just jump users off and say, well, if you want to have a conversation about this, you got to go to Yammer and do this. And so I think this is a really neat example where when WestJet publishes a piece of content, it gets published as a conversation in Yammer as well. And these are linked together. So you can see here that I can like this. And if I like this article, I'll like it in Yammer. And I can see the comments from Yammer. But if I want to comment on this, I click the join the conversation button and I pop over to Yammer. And this just makes it a really seamless experience to jump between these two digital workplace tools. Another example here is from First West Credit Union. And I think this is a great example of a team site directory. And I think this is another thing that we see time and time again where people have hundreds, if not thousands or tens of thousands of team sites. And, it can be a really cumbersome experience to find them. And so I think this is a neat example of allowing people to filter by audience or type or department. You can favorite a team site and so it's always there for you. You can get more information on it. So just making the experience of finding that team site a really, really great one. And I think this was an area where in Goldcorp, the team spent a lot of time and a lot of energy really taking this digital workplace concept to the next level. So this is where you can see here, we've got the My Goldcorp area. And at the very top, we've got my notifications. So these are things that maybe my vacation request was approved or various areas, my email, my calendar invites, my tasks, my newsfeed. Obviously, if you click on email, your email is not going to be in the conveyor portal, but it'll take you to the web version of Outlook where you can actually see your email. I think what's the most interesting of this area is the common actions area below. And this really follows that digital workplace experience that we want to model, where I want to report an incident or submit expenses or request a team site or book a leave request. This is amazing because I don't have to know what system. I don't need to know that something lives in SAP or another system. And this is important because different minds may use different systems. All I have to know is what I want to do, and the tool will take me to the right app or experience to complete that action. And so I think it's a really good example of how a really great intranet can be really the key pinning of your digital workplace experience. The second trend we're seeing is really the move to the cloud. And I really like this quote from Gartner. If you're a Microsoft shop, you will be moving to Office 365 in the future. The questions to ask are which parts, when, and in what order. I think when people talk about the cloud, they really tend to focus on the obvious things. You know, you can save money. That's one of the biggest parts of that cloud conversation. Also, agility. You no longer have to wait months to order the server hardware and get those servers spun up. But I think what the cloud gives us is so much more. These are the kind of less obvious things, but actually the more interesting ones. Things like machine learning and natural language processing and network analysis. These are all cloud capabilities that are allowing us to create these pretty exceptional digital workplace experiences. And this has been going on for years and years and years, but now we're starting to see these technologies come to life inside the workplace. So Amazon, from the get-go, delighted people with its recommendation engine and its learning on, you know, it was almost seen as magical. You know, how does it know what I'm going to buy next? But it knows. And I think that was a really great example. We're seeing tools like Siri, for example, that can take our language and parse that into commands and actually act on them. And I wanted to show a little example from Habanero. So this is from our kind of research lab. We love experimenting with technologies. And we created a chatbot to solve some of these problems. We really think that chatbots and AI will power the digital workplaces of the future. And so we created this little experiment to show everybody, you know, what a chatbot could do. So we created a chatbot called Habot, and I am going to show it to you today. So today we want to show you something from the lab. We've been doing a lot of experimentation on how AI and some of these technologies fits into the digital workplace. And so I wanted to show you Habot, which is a little chatbot experiment we have. So right now you can see I'm just going to jump into Microsoft Teams. So I'm in Microsoft Teams, and this is where I can have a conversation with Habot. And Habot's kind of interesting because Habot's connected to Active Directory, it's connected to our CRM solution, it's also connected to our ERP system. So Habot can actually do some fairly interesting things. Also because Habot lives within Office 365, it's connected to all those services using the Office 365 APIs and the Microsoft Graph. So let's take a spin. Let's meet Habot. Yeah. So the first thing I'm going to do is type in, let's find a contact. So I'm going to find contact John Hitzman. So what Habot's doing is it's actually going to Active Directory and saying, does John Hitzman live in Active Directory? But John's not in our Active Directory. He's in CRM. So because Habot couldn't find John in AD, it goes to CRM and right away brings me back all of the contact details I need. Now, here at Habanero, we give people fitness allowances. We think fitness is a really important part of a healthy lifestyle.
Employee experience, yes.
Employee experience. So I'm going to check, this might be a little embarrassing, but I'm going to check my own fitness allowance balance. So, fitness allowance. And I'm going to type that in. So in this case, that data is actually stored in our ERP system with my account. So Habot's actually going out there and saying, oh wow, I've got a decent technology allowance.
Yes, indeed.
And I have been using my wellness allowance, which is pretty good.
Yeah.
But you can imagine for a lot of these scenarios, we hear from a lot of customers where in order to check your vacation balance, for example, you have to click a link on your intranet, then you go into ASAP, then you have to remember different credentials, and then you've got 9 links to click on, and finally you get your vacation balance. Yep. So you can imagine what a better experience this is. You can also tell Habot things like, I'm running late. So Habot says here, would you like me to inform the meeting organizer that you'll be late for the review roundtable deck over drinks? Yes, poor Mallory. So Mallory's going to get, oh, look at that. It let Mallory know. It sent her an email and it tells me to drive safely. I probably shouldn't be using Habot when I'm driving.
Yes.
And then finally, a few more things we can do. Maybe I want to get my recent documents. So I'm going to click in here, get my recent documents. This is really neat because this is using the Office 365 APIs and the Microsoft graph. And you can see here I've got my Go Quick Start documentation, some Nintex licensing quotes, and a career site. And so these are the documents I've worked on. And what's really neat about this is, I could be on site on my mobile device, quickly say, hey, HabBot, give me the last things I've worked on, and one click, and I get my document, which is really neat. Now, I don't like presenting that much, so I feel a little sick. So I'm going to type in, I feel sick.
So sick you can't type.
I know, I'm just horribly sick right now. So I'm going to type in, I feel sick. And so what you can see here, HabBot says, I'm sorry to hear that. Would you like me to file a sick day for you? That's really nice. So HabBot's going into our ERP system, assigning me a sick day, and flagging that, which is really cool. So I don't have to do that because I'm sick. But HabBot goes one step further. Would you like me to turn on automatic replies in Outlook as well?
That's awesome.
So kind of a really neat example. I know when we show this to people, their eyes really light up because there's a lot of potential you can see here on how we can create these new, I turned on my automatic replies.
Mallory's really going to be concerned.
Mallory's going to think I'm very sick. You have to do the presentation tomorrow by yourself, Mallory. But as you can see here, there's a lot of potential with this technology, especially as we look at all of these integrated digital workplace experiences. So kind of a fun example, one thing we've learned is really with bots and chatbots in general, keep them simple, keep them focused on one area of the business. Creating a bot that does too much is just, it's not going to be successful. So hopefully you enjoyed that, and we're going to jump into our third trend.
So our third trend is in the area of employee experience design. And I think maybe the easiest way to explain this is it's kind of borrowing from the long established customer experience work. So this idea that your customer interacts with your company in a variety of ways, many touch points, some of them virtual, some of them physical, and how can you create a overall holistic, wonderful experience for those customers. So everything I just said, replace customer with employee. And workplaces are now very much aware that they need to treat their employee experience with that same kind of design aspiration. So there's this whole new frontier that's being focused on the employee. So one interesting example is the area of onboarding. And one of the reasons why we like talking about onboarding is because onboarding is usually thought of as a process. It's about, if only I had a better checklist, I had a better spreadsheet, then everyone who joined would be on payroll, would have their business cards, and would have their computer on their first day. What we found is you want to actually broaden your view. Don't think of it as a process, think of it as an experience. And what I'm going to show you right now are just some tools that we've used to create employee experiences. So one of the first things we do is, yes, understand your employees. We come from the fancy way of putting it is we do a lot of empathetic research. We're very much about wanting to walk a mile in another person's shoes because that's what allows us to really meet their needs and satisfy their requirements. So what you're looking at right now are some personas that we created for our own onboarding experience. These are some of the key players in onboarding. There are others, but just for an example. And so how did we create these personas? Partly through some empathy mapping, interviews, observations, feedback from new employees. Then what you want to do is you want to map what the experience is. So again, thinking of onboarding, this is just a snippet of an overall broader experience map, but here you can just quickly see that there are these milestones where overall we're in the area of pre-onboarding. You can see there are times where the candidate is feeling great, and then there are times where they're feeling really stressed out and unhappy. And not to overly simplify, but when you're creating an experience, you want to try and
turn the frown upside down.
That's the one. Exactly. We want all happy faces, or at least well, you can recognize that there are going to be experiences where people will feel how they feel, and you don't have to. That's not necessarily something you've got to squash. But there are opportunities to improve upon it or give them support in those areas where they need it. So that's an experience map. So just some examples of tools that we use when we're doing employee experience design. If this has perked your interest, by all means, please reach out, and happy to share templates with you or just talk more about what it is that you're trying to create.
And number 4, the power of roadmaps.
So roadmaps are another tool that we use in all of our engagements, really. They are probably the best way to make sense of the barrage of information that can go into kind of any engagement. But certainly when it comes to planning an intranet, there are so many moving pieces. We found roadmaps to be one of the most effective ways of monitoring all of that. So if we imagine, say, you've done a bunch of research, you know your intranet's pain points, you have you know your corporate priorities, you have this vision for your modern workplace, and now you've even got some ideas for features and functionality, but you're sort of not sure what to do with it all. You've hopefully gotten to this place with your team, so not only is it that you know these things, but it's also spread out amongst a whole bunch of different people's heads. So what we like to do then is use a roadmap. And so, for instance, here you can see some examples of either areas, feature areas or activity areas that would go into an intranet project. And what we do is we get them, you know, somewhere easy and visible, and we get people to, by people I mean the intranet team, start to make a note of, you know, is this high impact, medium effort, broad audience, just to get a sense of things. And then you can start to really lay out what your future could be along the lines of dealing with those various feature sets or activity areas. And so this is, you know, just like a for realsies view of it, but here might be a little easier to take in. So clearly don't try reading the text, but basically roadmaps are broken into phases. There are these feature areas that I was mentioning. In this case, it's about wanting to surface key communication. For each of these feature areas, you can see how they align with the design principles that were established early on of like, this is the high level anchors to what kind of an intranet experience you're wanting to create. And then by using colors and iconography, you can then map out each of your feature areas and how they align with those design principles. And that's just a nice quick visual to see that there are certain things that align with everything. There are some that only align with one. And that may in fact start to give you some sense of priority. Maybe you want to shift the columns around, move them into different phases and what have you. Then you've got the description of those features. You've got how do those features tie back to some sort of value to the employee, because you always want to stay grounded in who is it that this intranet is meant to serve, right?
Some of the best roadmaps I've seen are the ones that actually phrase that in employee quotes.
Exactly.
Like, you know, this is what this does to me that adds value to my life.
Absolutely. And the reason why we use those, we often express the value in quotes, is because it's a subtle way of getting you to put yourself in the shoes of your end consumer, if you will. So again, it's that empathetic lens. But can't ignore, there's got to be value to the business. And often we do these as quotes as well. But this is where you can articulate, you know, this particular feature area is totally going to align with, you know, XYZ corporate priority or direction or what have you. Then you definitely want to take time to start to sketch out what some of the success metrics will be. This is almost a precursor to creating that measurement framework I talked about earlier. And so this becomes kind of a good source of information for building out that measurement framework. And then this whole bottom section are around success requirements. So it can be about, you know, your content, communication, change management, training, key adoption, etc. And if this was of interest, we do have a post on our Insights blog that talks all about road mapping. And so if you just Google this, using a roadmap to bring your portal to life, you'll find a link to that.
So that brings us to the end of today's webinar. If you've got any questions on roadmaps, chatbots, or anything intranet related, please feel free to reach out. Our email addresses are on the screen.
And of course, we just want to thank you for taking the time to tune in for today's presentation.
Have a great day.